Welcome to my presentation for the Sustainable Prospects module. Over the duration of this video, I will be discussing my practice with regards to how it has evolved, the influences behind my work and motivations, objectives behind my research project, and the markets and audiences it is likely to attract. The project In Between the Lines incorporates two different structures using architectural elements. I have created a series of landscapes for each one. During this module, I have developed my work in progress by moving further into the genre of fine art photography. The design process of using architectural components are intuitive and a reflection upon my experience of having worked as an interior designer. My technique incorporates the use of a telephoto lens, which is highly beneficial as it makes the subject appear larger in the frame. The impact will be much higher on the detail as the foreground and background elements appear much closer together. Within the composition, space, line, texture, light, colour and pattern are essential towards creating an aesthetically pleasing landscape. I introduced the colour as I thought it was very informative to this particular structure and body of work. Combining the monochromatic sets a more subtle tone for this desired aesthetic. The use of multiple exposures are intended to highlight the interlocking shapes, reveal their complexity, and portray interaction with the imagination and reality. Stephanie Jung is a fine art photographer who explores the methodology of multiple exposures in her cityscapes. The imagery conveys the invasive bright lights and chaos that occurs in major cities such as New York, Tokyo, and Paris. She describes the series with the intention of capturing the vibrant and hectic mood of the city. As opposed to using a single image, the multiple exposures achieve a more impactful outcome, with expressing the energy in the city and successfully translating the narrative of transience and time that she believes we are confronted with from moments in life that we may not necessarily see with our own eyes. I recently discovered the very hypnotic and surreal work of Daniel Everett, an artist whose work consists of photography, sculpture, and video, who is currently based in Utah. His architectural images have been shot worldwide, including Europe and Asia. He has a tendency to blur and blend his images together from different places to allow the viewer to experience how a place might feel. Through his creative process, there is a sense of hyperrealism that incorporates photography and sculpture. He is interested in the viewer's interpretation of how a photograph changes when treated as a sculptural object, and the work he is interested in is the perception of sculpture as a two-dimensional form. I can identify with the narrative and visions through the perception of Everett's work. I have a tendency to revisit and revise the work, as I may have missed an element, and the work is always open to evolving. Robert Genn once stated, "Abstraction generally involves implication, suggestion and mystery, rather than obvious description." This quote resonated with me, as my intentions at present and going forward is to develop a more abstract medium. I want my audience to perceive this body of work with an element of mystery and intrigue. I purposely set out to make the structures less identifiable for the viewer to see the image in a different light. The abstract nature of the fragments can also suggest a variety of perceptions through the viewer's imagination, even in a metaphorical sense. Angie McMonagle continues to inspire my work with her fine art approach to capturing bold architectural details. In her Cloud Scrapers series, she describes the meaning as, "Much of my work has a tie between the structures we create and the juxtaposition with nature." With this particular series, I want to emphasize the contrast in the hard lines and geometry of these structures with the soft fluidity of the clouds, showing how the two can complement each other. During the second half of this module, I created a second series of landscapes using elements from another structure that appealed to me. Due to its material surface, geometrical characteristics, Working with monochrome within this composition was far more successful in highlighting the shape, form and contrast of shadow and light. Harry Callahan has continued to inform my work with regards to using monochrome for its timeless quality and exploring various ideas with making multiple exposures and creating extreme contrasts. What sets him out from other artists was his ability to be diverse and multifaceted. Besides the creativity, there is also a connection with his work on an emotional, spiritual level. And in a statement he once said, "I felt I had to have something to take that place. And with photography, when I happened to get started in photography, all over a sudden it did that for me, and that's the way I always feel about it, is that I want it to have something spiritual in it that makes somebody feel something." During this module, we were encouraged as to which market our work is most suitable to and to position ourselves in a professional capacity. I believe that this body of work would be suitable to the architectural and interior design market. Ideally, an exhibition in a fine art gallery context would be more appropriate. Going forward with this module in mind, I realised that a marketing strategy was necessary to consider making this body of work financially sustainable. That would involve creating more images to build this portfolio, a professional website which is essential, showcasing the strongest imagery and recent projects, networking with appropriate clientele, and researching the appropriate galleries and spaces to exhibit my work. Prior to the MA course, when I set up my Instagram account, I hadn't considered it to be a marketing strategy, as it was used for personal and not in a professional capacity. Following the response and increase in following from posting on the Flexible Falmouth account, I was pleased with the outcome. I realised that it was an essential aspect in sustaining my practice and marketing tool to engage with other artists. Although it can be time consuming, I believe I will have to be more committed with making it a regular habit to post imagery. However, I do believe it is essential to ensure that the projects are completed before posting online. Selling the work on Instagram will be the most effective social media platform for self-promotion and would appeal to a larger audience. Overall, following a challenging period during this module, my work in progress has been successful in relation to its significance and visual representation. For me to arrive at a conclusion, a quick recap of my progression and achievements through each module was imperative to clarify my critical intent before going into my final major project. Module 1 was probably the least successful. I had no clear intention in mind, and the architecture I had chosen was very haphazard, with no idea of narrative. Unfortunately, due to a personal bereavement, I was not in a good frame of mind and was unable to focus. Module 2 was more successful, and the content provided through informing context gave me insight as to where my project could develop. I focused on architects who I admired and captured elements that identified the movement of deconstructivism. Module 3 was a real turning point for me. Still keeping in mind unconventional architecture of architects who I admired, of course. Being introduced to alternative methodologies allowed me to experiment and develop the project and think about the motivations behind my practice. Following this module, I am more confident as to where my work sits in a commercial capacity. Above all, working through the process of my landscapes has allowed me to let go of the regimented thinking that is so instilled in you as a designer and always having to follow a set of rules. The MA has encouraged me to be free of this way of thinking and has seen my work evolve. I look forward to the next chapter. Thank you for listening.